Here we go! Muy buenos dias! Buenas tardes, buenas noches, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I don't know when you're listening or watching this, but welcome. Welcome everyone to Business 123 Introduction to Investments for Fall 2023. All of us at Southwestern are proud, honored, grateful, and happy that you're with us. For those of you who are enrolled in the class, welcome. And for those of you who are not enrolled in the class, welcome. Everyone is welcome. Of course, if you don't enroll in the class, you're not going to get college credit, but all the material is freely available to everyone through the magic of the internet. I'm sorry. My name is Frank Payano. You can say Mr. P, or people call me Paco. My students at San Isidro wouldn't call me Frank. I mean, I prefer Frank, but people don't feel comfortable calling the professor by their first name. But the Latinas in San Isidro, they would call me Senor Paco. And then when we'd have a hard problem in the business math class, they'd say, Ay, Paquito, es tan difícil. Anyway, I introduced myself elsewhere. But as I said, all of us at Southwestern are just very, very happy that you're with us. We are going to embark on a journey. You, dear students, following the material in this class, it's not that hard intellectually. Emotionally, it can be difficult. You will become investment gurus. And we want you to become wealthy. We want you to be the best stock pickers out there, or maybe you find another niche in the investment world, because we're going to go through the entire spectrum of investment alternatives, some of which I hope you stay away from. So let's get started. The class website is Wonder Professor. I know it sounds kind of silly, but it's something I wanted you to remember. And there's a little blurb about how it all came about. I'm now a professor emeritus, which is a fancy way of saying that they can pay me part-time wages. And no more committee work, so that's cool. And my apologies, I have to change this. This is now the School of Business. No longer are we the School of Business and Technology. They took that away from us. But let's get started on slide number 2 with a perspective. It is a gloomy moment in history. Never has the future seemed so dark and incalculable. The United States is beset with racial, industrial, and commercial chaos, drifting we know not where. Of our troubles, no one can see the end. When do you think this was said or written, huh? Last night on Skunk News? Weasel News? Fox News, right? I'm sorry, Fox News. No, actually, if you ask people when this was said, they would usually say, World War II, the Great Depression, maybe 9/11. But it was actually said in 1847. Some reports say it was 1857, but whatever, it was not quite 200 years ago. Did they have serious issues back in the 1840s? Yeah, the nation was about to rip itself apart over the issue of slavery. Ooh, don't call it slavery. Call it the peculiar institution. Do we have serious issues now? Yes. But so far, equating serious with fatal has been wrong. In fact, since the early 1800s, our standard of living has grown exponentially. If somebody alive then were to magically be transformed to now, they would just the culture shock would bowl them over. I mean, toilets weren't even invented yet in the 1840s. Right, we take them for granted, but I'll tell you, it's a lot nicer than having to walk the privy in the rain, yeah. So we hope that what you're going to see is that the future looks bright. Providing we don't blow ourselves up, die in our own ways, meteorite, tsunami, earthquake, disco returning. The last 200 years, the standard of living has grown exponentially, and so have the investments that brought us that standard of living. And I am firmly convinced that the next 20, 30, 50 years are going to be even better than the last 20, 30, 50, 200 years. The technologies that are coming down the pike, so to speak, as the saying goes, are just going to change our lives in ways we can't even imagine. I mean, you might not even need some burbling professor talking your ears off about one thing or another, because we'll be replaced by artificial intelligence. We will have driverless cars. We will cure cancer. We will have universal translators. Think how the world will change when we can actually speak to one another. I'm actually optimistic. So stick with us and let's see if we can make some money off of the future. Slide number 3, Chapter 1, Introduction, Overview, and Risk versus Return. You know, I'm not really sure what to call this chapter other than Chapter 1, because what we're going to do is we're going to introduce you to the major investment alternatives and some characteristics of investments. We're then going to look at the age-old, eternal struggle of risk versus return. Do you want to eat well or do you want to sleep well? Yeah. And hopefully by the end of the semester, you're going to learn that we can eat reasonably well and sleep reasonably well. And then at the end of the semester, end of this chapter, we're going to throw in short-term investments. Get them out of the way. They're really boring. They're supposed to be boring. And they're not that difficult. We are going to frame the entire semester around this wonderful quote from J. Kenfield Morley, which is over 100 and some odd years, 140 years old. In investing money, the amount of interest you want should depend upon whether you want to eat well or sleep well. And that's the whole class in a nutshell, folks. Risk versus return. But if I were to suggest to Mr. Morley a change, I would remove the word interest and insert the word reward, because interest is just one type of reward, return we get from investments. And hopefully you will follow along in the free-to-read book and see that the presentations are based on the chapters in the book, and the chapters in the book are based on the presentations, and we do our best to immerse you in this world where we're always worrying about whether we're going to eat well or whether we're going to sleep well. Yeah, I wish I could say to you that we're going to teach you to eat well without any risk whatsoever, and no. And I wish I could say to you that you're going to be able to sleep well and still make a ton of money. It doesn't work that way. But as we said, we're going to do our best to merge the two so that we eat reasonably well and sleep reasonably well. Slide number 4. We start with a very simple question, because this is an introduction to investments class. What is an investment? Now, there are various definitions. Here's our definition that we will return to often. An investment is any vehicle, sometimes people use the term instrument, into which resources can be placed with the expectation that it will generate positive income, or that its value will be preserved or increased, or both. So in other words, we're interested in income and capital gains. That's a fancy word for the thing becomes worth more, or both. Now, here's a definition that we're going to use over and over and over again by none other than Benjamin Graham, who was Mr. Warren Buffett's mentor, teacher at Columbia University in New York. And we'll refer back to good old Ben often. He passed away, sadly, in 1975. An investment operation is one which, upon thorough analysis, promises safety of principal and a satisfactory return. Operations not meeting these requirements are speculative. What does speculative mean? Well, it's the word we use in the industry. It means gambling, okay? We don't use the word gambling. No. That's when you go to Las Vegas. Nah, yeah. Many of these instruments that people are going to try to sell you are very speculative. They're rolling the dice. And you may do very, very well, and you might do very, very poorly. Probably the latter. So we're going to focus on the ones that give us a satisfactory return over the long term, assuming the world doesn't end. So over the next several slides, we want you to write down all these characteristics of different types of investments because we're going to refer to them throughout the semester. And you don't have to memorize all these things. I hope you do. But you'll come back to them and you'll say, oh, okay, I remember this and I remember that. Okay, that's the characteristic for this type of investment. So we said investment returns, investment rewards, I like both terms, come in two flavors. Cash flows, interest, dividend, rent, income. And the increased value, the decreased value. Capital gains, also called capital appreciations. Yippee! Yay! And then capital losses. Yeah, well, we gotta live with them sometimes. Investments come in all shapes, flavors, and sizes. So we want you to, in the face-to-face class, we would write on the board, and we give you a study guide. There's a study guide for every chapter. Check it out on the website and in Canvas, those of you who are enrolled. There are three major types of investments: securities, property, and personal investments. Now, we're going to spend most of our time on securities because for the vast majority of us, those are the most accessible and readily available investments. But security is such an unfortunate term. We used to call this class investments and securities, and students would go, I'm not an administration of justice major. I shouldn't be taking, no, not that type of security. Securities, you can think of them as in financial investments. That's the word I would use if I were king of the world. They are investments that represent debt or ownership or the legal right to acquire or sell an ownership interest. What are you talking? Don't worry about it. We'll get into more detail. But when you hear the word securities, you think, oh, these are financial investments. Okay, great. So what are we talking about? Stocks, bonds, mutual funds, short-term investments. And we'll discuss these in detail as we move through the next 16 weeks of semester. Property are investments such as real estate, real property, land, buildings. Where is the term real? Wait, imaginary? Are they imaginary? No. Real items, real investments refer to things that are attached to the ground or ground itself. And then there are personal property investments such as precious metals and cars, art, collectibles, and the like. Sometimes called hard assets or tangible assets. And then there's a whole category of investments called commodities. And what we find is for the vast majority of us, these things are just not that important, really. I mean, real estate is a whole world unto itself. But are you really going to invest in art, folks? Stick around. You buy art because of what it does to your psyche, what it makes you joyful, or makes you think, or whatever, makes how you feel. You don't buy art as an investment. There are just a tiny fraction of the world who will buy art as an investment, but not for the vast majority of us. And then personal investments, which in my humble opinion are very, very cool, but more intangible. I mean, you are investing in yourself right now by taking this class. Education, training, travel. And we often say that college is often the best investment a person will ever make. Now, why is that? Well, apart from the fact that it may or may not increase your earning potential, it's making you a more well-rounded, more, dare I say, erudite, which is a fancy word for smart person, and opening up horizons and vistas that you may never have seen before. So congratulations on making, I believe, one of the best investments you can make, and that is in yourself, taking our class. And in fact, elsewhere, when I introduce myself, you'll hear me say, we want this class to be the best class you've ever taken. And I know that's a little over the top, but it is sincere, and we're going to do our best to make it so. We want you to be awesome. We want you to become investment gurus, and your friends and family and coworkers will be so proud of you, and they will look up to you. You will speak with authority, and hopefully you'll save them from some, and yourself, from some really bad choices that are out there, folks. Slide 6. Investments are also categorized into primary versus derivative assets. Now, primary assets come in two forms. Debt, where you lend money, you become the bank and you lend money to others, and you receive a promise to repay the loan and interest. Or equity, where you are the partial or maybe the whole owner of a business or a property. So what are examples of some debt investments? Well, the one we're going to spend the most time on are what are called bonds. And I know there's different types of bonds. There's bail bonds, and there's savings bonds, and there's James Bond, and there's Barry Bond. No, but the bonds are mortgages. I mean, really, that's basically what they are for corporations and state and local governments. And we'll discuss those in detail. And then when you invest in a savings account or a certificate of deposit, which we'll spend time on this chapter, I'm sorry, not this class, you're actually lending your money to the bank. Yeah, that's what you're doing. Now, equity investments are businesses or properties. And we use the term stocks. I hate the term stocks. I wish they'd use the term business, because you're investing in a business. You're investing in a corporation through the stock ownership. And we'll discuss these in detail. In fact, we'll spend a lot of time on these things because stocks are where the action is. But there are partnerships and sole proprietorships and real estate investment trusts. So there are many choices in the world of equities. Now, derivatives. Okay. This is all you have to know about derivatives in this chapter. We'll go to, at the very end of the semester, we'll take a look at derivatives in detail, and hopefully you'll stay far away from them. These are securities, financial investments, that derive their value from an underlying security or asset. Huh? They're not the actual investment? They derive their value from another? And yeah, right, that's how they work. It's pretty bizarre. They're normally highly speculative. And what do we know about the word speculative? Gambling. And the major examples that you'll hear people talk about are options and futures. Actually, they're called options contracts and futures contracts, but try saying options contracts 3 times fast. And some in the industry, your humble instructor included, do not classify derivatives as investments. They are speculations. And that's our euphemism for what? When you hear the word speculation, what are you? Right, gambling. They're gambling. You may do very well. I wish you a lot of luck. You're going to need it. More likely, you're going to lose a lot quickly and then say, I'll never do that again. And it's a very expensive lesson learned. Slide number 7. Investments also are categorized in what are called direct investments or indirect investments. In a direct investment, your name is on the investment. You control the investment. You can buy and sell as you wish. So real estate, stocks, bonds, these are direct investments. Your name is on the account. Your name is on the title of the real estate. Indirect investments are investments where somebody else is in control. Somebody else is managing the money. You have limited control or more likely no control over the underlying investment. And examples of these are what are called mutual funds, which we'll discuss in detail in our next chapter. Real estate investment trusts, most often called REITs, which I love the term REIT, REITs, and limited partnerships. Now, there's a bit of confusion here. You can buy and sell your shares in the mutual fund or the REIT or the limited partnership, but you don't get to call up the mutual fund and say, hey, I think we should buy Apple. And they'll say, oh, thank you very much. We'll take that under consideration. Yeah. So direct investment, you're in charge. Indirect investment, somebody else is handling the control of the investment. Slide number 8. Investments are also categorized by what is called their domesticity. In other words, where do they get their mail? Where are they based? Now, here's a little subtle distinction that you need to internalize as soon as you can. Domestic is easy, right? That means it's based in the United States. International means it's based outside the United States. You'll often hear the term foreign or overseas. In other words, outside the United States. Global means everybody. Todo el mundo. Domestic and international. So please be careful of this subtle distinction. International, foreign is not the same as global. And a very smart mutual fund manager who has since retired said it very succinctly. The world is a very small place these days economically. Well, let's hear what Forbes has to say about this. 65% by value of the parts in the Ford Mustang come from the US and Canada. 90% of the parts in the Toyota Sienna, which happens to be built in Indiana, come from the US and Canada. So how do you buy a more American car than a Ford Mustang? You buy a Toyota Sienna. Think about it, folks. Where is Coke based? Coca-Cola. Do you know? It's actually Atlanta, Georgia, which happens to be part of the United States. So Coke is a domestic company. But did you know that they make 80% of their money outside the United States? So if every United Stater, if every citizen of the United States decided, I'm never going to drink Coke again, no more fizzy sugar water for me with a brown crayon dipped in it, they'd still be a huge corporation from just their outside sales. In fact, there's one company that's based in the United States that sells all their products outside the United States. So let us turn to slide number 9 and play a little game. Is it domestic or is it foreign? So just scan through the list. Who do you think is domestic? Who do you think is foreign? Yeah, we would yell out in the face-to-face class. How about Budweiser? Mother Bud, right? Mother Bud. Is Budweiser a United States company or a foreign company? Yeah, it's actually part of a Brazilian-Belgian consortium. What? In fact, what about Miller? Is Miller Miller beer? No, they're now owned by a South African company. How about Coors? Coors? Well, no, it's actually now based in Canada. Molson bought them. They say it was a merger, but really Molson bought them. Pabst and Schlitz? Yes, they're still based in the United States, but they don't brew beer anymore. It's all brewed by the same company that owns Miller, the South African company. Who is the largest brewer of beer in the United States? You're not going to believe me. Corona. Right. And there was talk about them being bought by some company in Latin America. Shell Oil. You know what Shell's real name is? Royal Dutch Petroleum. Yes, it's an Anglo-Dutch consortium that's been around for over 100 and some odd years. Ben & Jerry's, based in Vermont, not anymore. They got bought by Unilever in the UK. Farmers Insurance is owned now by Scudder in Switzerland. Arco is, Atlantic Richfield is now owned by British Petroleum. In fact, before the Gulf disaster of 10, 12 years ago, when that platform blew up and all the millions of gallons of crude destroyed much of the Caribbean Sea, they were changing their name. They were underneath the Arco. It had a BP company, because on the east coast of the United States, you see a lot of BP stations. You don't see them here, but I think that was the plan, was to change all the Arcos to BP. And then when the disaster hit, they took away the BP company and they kept it Arco. What about Gerber? No, that's owned by Nestle. Firestone is now owned by Bridgestone in Japan. Cup of Soup, foreign. Fox News, come on, if you don't watch Fox News, you is not a patriotic American. It's actually based in Australia, News Corp. Seagram's, Canada, but not anymore. They sold off parts of it, and now most of it is not in Canada anymore. Bayer Aspirin is Germany. Vaseline is UK. Friskies is Swiss. Trader Joe's, German. It's actually owned by Aldi. Yeah. And now 7-Eleven, Japanese. Now, wait, 7-Eleven is a really interesting story here. Remember, you're going to learn about companies, and these companies, there's a story to every one, and I just love it, digging deep, and I hope you will too. 7-Eleven is actually started in Texas, right? It used to be called the Southland Corporation, and it went all over the United States, and then in the 1980s, they started in Japan, and they called it 7-Eleven of Japan. And it turns out the Japanese love small stores. And so at the 7-Eleven in Japan, you buy everything. It's like you go grocery shopping at the 7-Eleven, where you don't do that here. It's a convenience store, and the prices are really high, so you're paying for the convenience. But not there, no. And they got so large, they turned around and bought the United States 7-Eleven. And now, I don't know if you've been to Mexico lately, but they are making a big move into Mexico, because in Mexico, there's a company called OXXO, which is like a 7-Eleven, and it is in every single corner of them. So the 7-Eleven said, well, we're going to move ourselves into Mexico. Now, Volvo and Saab, right? Those were the first ones you thought, well, obviously they're foreign, aren't they? Really? No. For 20 years, Volvo was owned by Ford and Saab was owned by GM, but no, not anymore. Now Volvo is owned by Geely. It's a Chinese company, and Saab got bought by some tiny little, the car company. The Saab, there's other parts of Saab that are surviving, but the car company got bought by a little tiny something or other in the Netherlands, I think. Yeah. You see, some people get really upset about this. They get really upset that the world is global. But the younger folks, they take it for granted. There's no first world, second world, third world. There's only one world, okay? You only got one world. And I know it's often not a popular view, but we better learn to get along and live together, because I don't know if you're placing your, like Elon Musk, placing your bets on Mars. I wouldn't do that. I figure we got to get this place worked out. We have serious problems, just as they did 200 years ago, but I'm optimistic that we'll work it out. We'll see. We will fix global warming. We don't have a choice. We got to do something. There's some ideas that have been percolating. One was to actually put some metallic materials in the upper atmosphere that would block some of the sunlight, and boy, did that get a lot of bad press. We're going to have to do something, or we're not going to survive. It's that simple. And we are, if nothing else, resourceful in keeping ourselves alive, except when we wage war upon one another. And let's hope we don't start World War III. Are you listening, Mr. Putin? Slide number 10. Global investing. Here are the top 18 countries according to per capita income in alphabetical order. Which country had the best average annual return over the past 50 years? Who do you think? Huh? Well, it turns out it was Sweden, and then Denmark, and then the Netherlands. Wait a minute! They're socialists. They have socialized medicine. Their students are not saddled with $100,000 worth of student loan debt and then are not allowed to declare bankruptcy. Folks, the United States is not bad, 10.7%. That's pretty darn good. But notice some countries have done better. Now, some countries have done a whole lot worse. What's going on with Italy, Austria, Spain, Japan? Well, it's not that much lower, but look at Italy and Spain and Japan. Has a lot to do with demographics. In fact, if you go to Italy, they'll sell you a house for €1, which is a little over $1. Of course, you're gonna have to spend $10,000 to $20,000 or euros to get it back up to snuff because they're losing population. In the United States, we have always increased our economy and our population by immigration. And at times in our history, that has been very unpopular. Right now, it's a political football. But as I said, I'm optimistic. We'll see. We'll see. And we'll come back to this, folks. We'll come back to this. The return of the stock markets in the developed world has been 8.02%. So that includes, the developed world. That includes most of the big companies around the world. Now, we're going to discuss also the developing world where things are growing even faster. Well, it's because they're starting from a smaller base. Now, one of the most important issues when we become investors is what's our time horizon? Is it short term, intermediate term, or long term? Now, there are various guidelines depending on who you talk to. These are the general guidelines through the industry. Short term is up to a year or so. Intermediate term, 2 to 5 years. Often considered long term is anything 5 or more years. I take a little longer view. My guidelines are 1 to 2 years, maybe even 3 years, depending on how important you need the money in that short term. Intermediate term, 3 to 5, 6, 7 years, 7 years or longer, 10, 20, 30 years. These guidelines are more used by the life insurance companies. These guidelines at the top are more used by the financial and investment services companies. Before you make an investment, you must know your time horizon because that will rule out certain investments. I mean, if you need this money in 6 months, don't put it in the stock market. The stock market can fall 20% in a month, in a week, in a day. It's done it before. It'll do it again. But if you have 7, 10, 20 years, oh boy, businesses, stocks are where you need to be. Cool. Make sense? And we'll talk about short-term investments in this chapter, at the end of the chapter. If you need the money in 6 months, 3 months, a year, you're stuck. You got to put it in a short-term investment because you're guaranteed that it'll be there when you come back in 6 months. But if you don't need the money for 10, 20, 30 years, don't put it in the bank. That banker will be licking his or her chops. Slide 12. Investments are also categorized into what are called liquid or illiquid investments. Now, liquid investments don't mean we have more beer for the weekend. No. They're easily and quickly converted into cash. There's a ready market to purchase the investment, and the change of ownership happens quickly. So examples of these are stocks, bonds, mutual funds, REITs. You call up your broker, you go online, boom, you sold it or bought it, and it's gone. Illiquid investments are investments that are difficult or sometimes almost impossible to convert into cash. The market for the investment is small, or the change of ownership happens slowly, or both. The poster child for illiquid investments is real estate. Typically, it takes 3, 6, 9 months to sell a house or a real estate investment, such as a building or land or whatever. Sometimes it takes longer. Now, sometimes when there's this supply-demand imbalance, as there is in Southern California and other parts of the country. You put this for sale sign up, or now you put it online, on Thursday. By Saturday, you got 5 or 10 offers, and Sunday, you write the sales agreement. But that's not usually the case. Partnerships, collectibles are also often very illiquid. I mean, yeah, you got this baseball card collection, and online the guy says, hey, this guy says it's worth $1,800. When you go to sell it, he'll give you $900 for it. Right, so that's another example of illiquid investment. Sometimes art, yeah. Okay, and then lastly, slide 13, risk versus return. We've already made mention of this. It's the eternal tug of war, the eternal struggle in investments. Do you want to eat well or do you want to sleep well? Now, return is very easy to measure, right? Boom, you know, how much did you start with? How much did you end with? That's your return. But risk is very difficult to measure. In fact, it's impossible. Notice our definition of risk. It's not the definition that most of us would think about when we think of risk. Risk is the chance that actual investment returns will differ from our expected returns. So we usually think of risk as suffering harm or loss or danger. And there's a bit of that depending on which investments you choose. But in what we're going to do is we're going to define risk as we're going to use a number, which is has some meaning to it, but it's impossible. But we're going to say, look, we're defining risk as the chance that we don't get what we expect to get. We might get more. We might get more than we expect. But we say going in, we're looking for 8% or 7% or 10%, and we don't get that. And in general, the higher the expectation of investment returns, the higher the risk level. So we want you to remember this, folks. It comes down to, do you want to eat well or sleep well? If you want higher returns, you're going to get high risk. And don't worry, we're going to go over this again. In fact, we're going to dedicate an entire presentation to this. And you will, coming out of that presentation, in my humble opinion, understand that nothing's guaranteed. If it is, some things are guaranteed, but if they are, you're not going to make any money. But when you leave the confines of short-term investments, you're going to take on risk. But the news is good, assuming the world doesn't end and that we do what we think we're going to do over the next 10, 20, 30 years, and we don't blow ourselves up, die in our own waste, Ebola becomes all the rage, whatever. I firmly believe the next 20, 30 years are going to be the best years economically in the history of human civilization. We'll see. Okay, now what's the risk versus return spectrum? Low risk is considered anything less than about 3 or 4%, 5%, I don't know. Just a few years ago, no. Interest rates have gone up, so now you can get fairly low risk investments for 3, 4, 5%. Moderate risk, 4, 5, 6, 7, even maybe up to 8%. And then high risk, anything above 8, 9, 10%, 11, 12%, I consider high risk. Now, other people disagree with me. They might put high risk at anything above 12%. I disagree. A lot of it depends, as we're going to see, on your temperament. And we hope to instill upon you a positive attitude and the psychological protection that when the markets fall, you don't panic. But we'll see, because emotions are emotions, and we feel what we feel. Intellectually, we're going to see, especially in the next chapter and next presentation, next two presentations, we're going to see that, wow, look at how well they've done, how these investments have done. We should invest with these investments. But emotionally, when they drop 20%, 30%, 40%, yeah. So anything greater than 12%, in my humble opinion, is speculation. And as I've said, we don't, at least in this class, consider speculation investing. It is speculating, and it is dangerous, and it is gambling. So we will make this distinction over and over again. Now, let's put it all together in slide 14. Let's try some examples. What type of investment is the Bank of America savings account? Well, Bank of America is a bank. You're putting your money in the bank. You're lending your money to them. So that's not property. It is essentially a security, a financial investment. Right, that's why I like the term financial investment. Is it debt or equity? It's actually debt. Yeah, you're lending your money to Bank of America. And they will promise to pay you interest, not much, and they'll pay the money back. So that's debt. Is it direct or indirect? It is direct. Your name is on the, it's called a registration. Your name is on the account. You're registered. You're the registered owner. Is it domestic or foreign? Yeah, well, Bank of America, yeah, they're in the United States. Is it short-term, intermediate term, or long-term? We're going to learn that savings accounts are short-term investments. Now, you might have some money in a bank for intermediate-term investments, but don't put long-term money in a savings account. Low, moderate, or high risk? Well, very low. Right, because it's guaranteed by the full faith and credit of the United States government through the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. Is it liquid or illiquid? Well, it's actually very liquid, but it depends. If you go to the bank and you have $77,000 in the bank, and you say, I want my money in cash. I want $77,000 in cash. And this is what was going on in 2008 when people were worried about the banks failing. The bank will look at you and say, well, sorry, we don't keep that kind of cash in the bank. In the ATM next door, there's $300,000 in cash. Shows you how secure they believe the ATMs are. Come back tomorrow and we'll have it. And they'll try to dissuade you from taking it in cash. They'll say, look, we can make you a cashier's check. It's good as cash. And then they'll call the FBI and report a suspicious transaction. And people say, well, it's 10 because you took more than $10,000. No, there's no numeric value. If you do what the bank is or the credit union is supposed to consider a suspicious transaction, there's no one number. They are supposed to consult the FBI. So that's part of the Patriot Act. Don't do that. Okay. Anyway, what about Nestle Foods? Nestle, right? You heard of Nestle chocolate. They they're the world's biggest food producer, folks. Is it a security or property? It's a security. It's a stock. It's a business, a financial investment. Is it debt or equity? It is equity. When you buy one share of Nestle, you are part owner of that company. Now, tiny little bit, but you're part owner. Is it direct or indirect? Well, your name is on the brokerage account, so your name is on the stock. And they used to give you stock certificates. They don't do that anymore. Is it domestic or foreign? Yes, it's based in Switzerland. But it's one of those companies that's called a country unto itself. It's everywhere around the world. No matter where you go in the world, you're going to see Nestle's Foods. How about short-term, intermediate-term, or long-term? Now, generally, stocks, we like to consider them as long-term investments. As Mr. Warren Buffett says, if you wouldn't think of owning a stock for 10 years, don't buy it for 10 minutes. When asked about day trading. So, but it's Nestle. So it could be an intermediate term investment. Yeah, we could keep it for 3 or 4 years. And we're going to discuss this time frame with stocks in detail later on in the semester. So just stick with us. Low, moderate, or high risk? Well, in general, stocks should be considered high risk. But it's Nestle, right? So you could consider it moderate, but remember, the stock market as a whole, even multinational corporations based all around the world, can fall quickly. So moderate to high risk. Liquid or illiquid? Very liquid. Somebody will buy your 100 shares or 17 shares or however many you have of Nestle Foods. Yes. Now, how about Southwestern College Proposition AA and R bonds? What are these things? Well, you see that stadium we built? Maybe you haven't because you're not going to Southwestern College in Chula Vista, California. But we have been destroying the campus. I'm sorry, we've been remodeling the campus, deleting, destroying, raising all these beautiful old buildings and making horrifically awful buildings in their places. And we did not hold a bake sale to raise that money. We sold bonds to the general public. Thank you, voters, who gave us the okay to do that. And now we have to pay those bonds off over the next 30 years through the property taxes. And you might say, well, Piano, what do you know about buildings? I know what I like. And as soon as I saw that math building, I said, that looks like a prison. It's got bars around it. And if you don't believe me, know that we've earned 2 architectural onions. Here in San Diego, we have Orchids and Onion Awards from the architectural community, and we've earned 2 onions for these ugly buildings. Anyway, is it a security or property? Well, the buildings are property, but no, you don't own the buildings. That's owned by the community college district. You own the bonds, which are financial investments. Are they debt or equity? They are debt. You have lent your money to Southwestern, and now we promise to pay you back the interest and the principal over time, kind of like a mortgage. Is it direct or indirect? Your name is on the account. They used to be paper, and everything's electronic now. So it is a direct investment. Is it domestic or foreign? And some people call us Tijuana Tech, but there is an Instituto Tecnológico de Tijuana, so that's not a very nice thing to call us, because there is an Institute Tijuana Tech in Tijuana. So yes, we're still domestic. Short-term, intermediate term, or long-term. Bonds can be considered intermediate term in certain cases, but usually people buy them for the long term. There are some situations where they can also be considered short term, but that's a special exception. Low, moderate, or high risk? In general, we got a very good credit rating, thanks to the credit agencies. So moderate to low. A lot of it depends on what the interest rate is, and we're going to go into that in detail later on. But yeah, they're not high risk. No, Southwestern's not going bankrupt anytime soon, I hope. Liquid or illiquid? Very liquid. Yes, there's a ready market for bonds. It turns out that bonds don't trade as often as stocks, but there's still a ready market for them. Okay, how about duplex in Spring Valley? Spring Valley is one of our suburbs here in Chula Vista in South Bay of San Diego, for those of you who are watching this from somewhere else. You rent one and live in the other. Now, this is an interesting investment. Yeah, you get to live in it, unlike a stock or a mutual fund or a bond. And you get rent. So, is it a security or property? It is property. It is real estate. It is attached to the ground. Is it debt or equity? You are the owner. It is equity. Is it direct or indirect? Your name is on the title. Your name is down at in our case, it's the county admin building or the county courthouse or the city courthouse, wherever they keep the records, because all real estate transactions are recorded. Is it domestic or foreign? Yes, it's still based in the United States, even though we're fairly close to Tijuana. Short-term, intermediate term, or long-term? In my humble opinion, in real estate should be considered a long-term investment. Now, you're going to see shows about flippers, and I wish them a lot of luck, because it ain't easy. It's not peaches and cream as they try to portray it on the television. Real estate's a long-term investment. Low, moderate, or high risk? Well, a lot of it depends on how much you spend for the darn thing and what your debt level is. But in general, real estate should be considered moderate to high risk. Again, it depends on your individual situation, because if you really have overextended yourself, you can get in a lot of trouble. In fact, a lot of people did back in the 2008, 9. Well, they started in 2004, 5, 6, 7, and while the music was playing, everybody was making a ton of money. And then when the music stopped playing, right. Oh boy. So yes, moderate to high risk. Liquid or illiquid? Right. Real estate is considered illiquid in general. But when there is a supply-demand imbalance, as there is in San Diego, you'd be able to sell it pretty darn quickly. What about Qualcomm Corporation? Now, who are they? used to be a stadium, and it's supposed to be all uppercase, but I have a hard time looking at it that way. They're one of the biggest employers in San Diego. Right. They make chips. No, they don't actually make the chips. They have somebody else make them. They design the chips, and they also are the originator of one of the two major ways that cell phones talk to one another. It's called CDMA. It stands for can't do much of anything. No. Code division multiple access. But the two have merged. The other one was GSM, which was divided, designed by Nokia, if you remember them. So what is it? It's a security. It's a stock. It's a financial investment. Is it debt or equity? It's equity. You own a portion of Qualcomm. Is it direct or indirect? It's direct. Your name is on the account. Domestic or foreign? Well, they're based here in San Diego, but they make most of their money outside the United States. Short-term, intermediate term, or long-term? Well, again, stocks should be considered long-term because they're pretty volatile. And Qualcomm has been a great stock for many people, but it's still very volatile. It's in the tech sector. Low, moderate, or high risk? Considered high risk. And then liquid or illiquid, very liquid. Somebody wants to buy your shares of Qualcomm. Cool. Now, the last one. Loan to Uncle Harry. Okay. Every family has a Tio Lucas, Uncle Harry. Yeah, okay. Is it a security or property? Well, it's a financial investment, so it's kind of like a security, although it's not really worth the paper you wrote it on. Is it debt or equity? It's debt because you lent it to Uncle Harry. Direct or indirect? Yes, you're in charge of the investment. It's direct. Is it domestic or foreign? Well, he's still here in the States, so hopefully he'll get a postcard from somewhere. Is it short-term, intermediate term, long-term, or forever term? Yeah, you think you're going to get your money back? Low, medium, moderate, or high risk? Oh boy, is it high risk? And is it liquid or illiquid? Nobody's going to take that debt off of your hands. You're stuck. So hopefully now you now see that there are various characteristics that we attribute to various different types of investments. And as we go through the semester, we're going to concentrate on one of these categories at a time and see how those characteristics merge and mesh with that investment. So go back over, get the study guide, learn these terms, be awesome. Again, thank you so much for being in our class. We want you to be awesome. We want you to be the best investors the world has ever seen. We want you to become very wealthy. And we are happy, grateful, honored, and privileged that you're with us. Okay? In our next presentation, we will now look a little closer. We'll move a little closer towards the different types of investments and in what we call the overview of the investment universe. Are you excited? Have you learned something already? I hope. Remember, folks, this is an introduction to investment class. Don't worry about all the terms that you've heard and all the things you've seen on the telly or the infernal net or your brother-in-law or uncle, the Mr. Know-it-all, who's authority on all things, including investments, who's told you these. All you need to know is what we've covered here, because we have a long way to go. You are going to be awesome. You are going to be the investment gurus for your friends and family. We are so proud of you. See ya.